Welcome to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Love Bay African Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay family, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic tonight is the Domestic Violence Prevention Task Force of Delaware County. We have with us Jan 2 of the Blue Sky Show and also co-founder of Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And our guest for the evening is Dr. Monica Taylor, Delaware County City Council Chair. So, listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. If you have resources that you'd like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Jan, too, I would ask if you would introduce yourself or just say hello to our listeners on tonight.
Just say hello to our global listeners. I'm DJ Jan, host of the Blue Sky Show on Love Bay. Blue Sky Show comes to you every Saturday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's such a pleasure to be on your show, Minister Tia.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Monica Taylor, would you introduce yourself to our listeners on tonight, please?
Yes. Hello, everyone. And thank you for having me on the show tonight. I'm very happy to be here and to talk with you and talk a little bit about what's going on in Delaware County.
Thank you so much. So we want to start, as usual, with sharing some resources that we have. First, we want to share the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org, and this is in the United States. Their phone number is 1-800-799-7233. And we also have the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as RAIN. Their website is rainn.org, rain.org. And then we have the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, PCAR. Their website is pcar.org. Their phone number is 1-888-772-7227. And with that, listeners, we will move into our topic on tonight, which is the Domestic Violence Prevention Task Force of Delaware County. So, Dr. Taylor, I would first ask you if you could explain to our listeners what exactly your position is as Delaware City Council Chair, first of all.
Yes. So I am the chair of County Council, and we oversee Delaware County services. And all of our positions, there are 5 council members, and we are all at large. So Delaware County, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's in the west of the west suburb, West Philadelphia. It's the western suburbs. We start in Upper Darby, go all the way to the city of Chester, up to Radnor, and out to Thornbury on the far west side. So quite a large size county. Our services include, when you think about the county, it's our health department, our human services, our services for the aging, our housing and community services, our commerce center and economic development, our county jail, and so many other services that are kind of under that umbrella of Delaware County.
Wow, I didn't know you covered so many areas. So I didn't know that. So how did you come to create the Domestic Violence Prevention Task Force?
We've been doing a lot of work in Delaware County on trying to expand and refine the services that we're offering, and really trying to work to break down silos and see where we can improve efficiencies. A good example of this is just recently, we just had our first year birthday. We actually were the largest county in the country by population that didn't have a health department. And that's actually one of the reasons why I ran for office, was to create one. And we were able to have that and started last April, and moving those resources into the community and thinking about health equity and health in all policies, and how we go about looking at our housing and our human services, and with the lens of health and health equity. And one of the areas that came to mind, we were doing a lot of interactions with Domestic Abuse Project in Delaware County.
Yes.
And with our health department and of course with human services, and looking at how they've recently received funding to be kind of to do more housing and more rapid rehousing in our community for those who are impacted by domestic violence. And they started to bring up ideas of, okay, well, there's some areas that maybe we can improve, or maybe some efficiencies, or all of the different silos aren't necessarily communicating with each other. And so that's kind of working with them was really where it came up. It was like, oh, how do we bring people to the table and try to get all the different areas that might intersect, especially with our government, that might intersect with those who are experiencing domestic violence? And how do we bring them together to create strategies and synergies
Yes.
and try to improve the structure for those who
Mhm.
are serving?
Okay. So I think I want to ask you, what does success look like for you for the task force? So you obviously have different sectors coming to the table to talk, and conversation is always a good start. But what would actionable, positive directives look like for this task force?
So I think in terms of the task force, it would be looking at where are the gaps. And so one of the things, we've only had our one meeting so far, which was last month, and we have our second meeting coming up next month. I mean, not next month, sorry, next week. And that meeting, and thank you for being a part of the task force. That meeting is really for each of the different divisions that intersect to talk about mapping what the system looks like
Mhm.
today, right? And where are we running into barriers? Where don't we have access? Where are people finding the hurdles? How, and then once we can identify all of those, how do we improve that aspect? How do we get more communication? And who are the partners who aren't at the table who we need to bring in to do so?
Yes. And so, Lefe, yes, I am actually a part of this task force, and which I appreciate the experience, because my belonging to the task force, and in my mind, I represent clergy because I'm a minister, but I also represent victims and survivors because of my experience. And I can say, having been a part of that first meeting, my lens is different. What I see and what I hear and how I compute information, and so I think I'm able to bring to the task force that the human touch of having experienced what this actually is and what victims and survivors need. So when I hear information, I receive it differently because I'm looking at it, on the end of, well, I've actually been through this, and this is what I needed. This is what I didn't have. This is what I think would be a help. And every situation is different, but I believe that there are some general things that we need to do that can be very specific, that will help those dealing with domestic violence. And so, again, just being able to be a part of the task force, having the voice to speak for victims and survivors, I appreciate that, because it's not just individuals sitting around a table just to throw out their titles. Um, I can see that there is a help that um, the group actually wants to be a part of, actually wants to determine. I can't stand being a part of a meeting just to come up with the fact that we know we have to have another meeting. But I appreciate being a part of this group, and I appreciate my voice being heard. Um, with that, Jan, do you have a question or a comment for Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, I think, Dr. Taylor, this is an amazing initiative, and I think that is so well needed just throughout this entire globe, because you have a lot of women that's suffering, and men as well. However, I would say that having someone like Minister Tia, who've suffered in silence for so many years and had the courage and had the people around her to write that book, Suffering in Silence, which I know now helps so many around the globe. I think in your particular area, Delaware, isn't that Joe Biden's area as well. But I think having an organization or people like yourself with Minister Tia being a voice to the voiceless, I think it is very important, especially in the climate in which we all live today.
Well, thank you. And, you know, we are so grateful for you being on the committee because you do bring a different lens, and that's really what we want. And if there are voices that we're missing at the table, we want them to be at the table as well because we can't build this to provide the services that survivors need without understanding what they need, right? Without
Yes.
understanding all of the aspects. And that's really what we want to get at.
Yes. And so, for instance, the task force also includes a representative from Children and Youth Services, which I think is amazing because domestic violence covers and touches so many areas of one person's life. So you're dealing with domestic violence, and it may be you who is being physically hurt, mentally or emotionally hurt. But if you have children, children are suffering too. And it could be a case where you're dealing with housing issues, you're dealing with poverty, or you're not having enough food in the house. These are different areas that are represented, and of course, police departments are represented. The section of dealing with law, that's represented in this task force because again there are so many areas of domestic violence that are touched, and you don't know until you're in it. You don't know what you need until you're in it. When you're dealing with it, like, you don't know, oh, now I need a lawyer. I need a lawyer to help me deal with custody. I need a lawyer to help me deal with finances. I obviously need the police to help me in different areas. I need someone to help me with housing. There's just so much that comes about, and you don't know it until you're in it. And when you're in it, I can tell you firsthand, it is very hard to sit and think and try to just come up with what I need. And so that makes the counselors very, very important. We deal with the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. The counselors and representatives there are just awesome and amazing. So they can sit with you and walk you through a process without forcing you into one area or another, but to sit and have a conversation with you and listen to you and help you touch those points in those areas of what you need. So again, I believe that this task force is amazing, and I believe it just has such great potential of being able to actually be a help. Um, with that, Dr. Taylor, I want to ask you: was there, when you created this task force, when you had it in mind, was there something specific that happened? Was there a specific event, or was there an accumulation of information that was before you? Like, what brought this to your attention to have you to create this task force?
Well, it really was the Domestic Abuse Project who kind of spearheaded it, and what they we started meeting with them on a regular basis, and just to kind of figure out where, you know, how do we help you? How do we support them in the best way that we can as a county government? And I think there was um, a incident where there was like just not enough communication between their agency trying to get someone into housing and trying to get someone the other supports that they might need. And it's like, hold on, wait, half of those agencies are actually some of ours. Like, how do we
Right.
break down those silos to make sure that our agencies are educated in the best way possible so that they can help and actually be a resource, an efficient resource to get folks what they need. And now it was just, let's bring everybody to the table. Let's see what's happening in our system right now. Let's map it. Let's see where we are. Let's see if this is a normal occurrence. Is this going on often? Is this how people are really experiencing the system? And if it is,
Yes.
we need to make changes, right? Yes.
Yes. So I can tell you firsthand, yes, this is how people are experiencing the system. And, and I don't want to be callous, and I don't want to just say, well, people aren't doing their jobs or people don't care. But I just believe that there are just instances where there is so much that needs to happen, and we just don't know everything that we need to know. When someone goes into a police department and says, I'm dealing with this issue, it's domestic violence. I don't think many officers will readily think, all right, do you have children that need to be taken care of? Do you have a safe place to go? Let me help you with housing. Let me point you in the right direction so you can get some help with finances. Or do you need food right now? I, I, I think we approach situations depending on the area that we work in. So I would think that a police officer is like, well, I'm going to deal with you right now. Let me make sure that you're safe right now, and not the forward thought of what's going to happen with children if children are in a house. If you're sitting with, maybe a lawyer and you're talking about custody, it may not be, in their mind, what's going to happen with the marriage part, how you're going to deal with that, how you're going to get through it, how that affects the children, unless you have experience in dealing with domestic violence. Because I can tell you the different areas that I had to deal with, and I was sharing with Dr. Taylor, custody had nothing to do with me getting divorced from my ex-husband and abuse. The courts don't want to hear that. I still had to work out child support, that's separate. I had to work out custody, that's separate. So I could not walk into any one of the courtrooms and say he was abusive. That's why I left him. This is what's happening. No, it's still he's the father of the child, and now I have to work out the for him to have either partial custody or visitation or whatever it is. So again, I think it's a lot of red tape, but I think depending on whatever department you work in, like that's where your mind is, and you want to get that part done. And I think at times we don't realize, again, unless you actually are working in the field of domestic violence, how all of these areas cross consistently and constantly. And it's a scary thing. It really is. To be thinking like I'm trying to save my life, I'm trying to be okay, and then in the next breath, I might have to be fighting for custody of my children, and nobody cares about the abuse part, So it's a lot. It can be overwhelming, but I think a key part is communication. With all of us coming to the table, I think if we all learn more. So, for instance, me, it will be helpful for me to learn more about the police departments, learn more about where your hands are tied. Why are your hands tied? Why can't this be done? Because I look at things and I see black and white. Like, fix it. I'm like, look, just go ahead and fix it. But it's helpful for me to understand, sometimes there are police captains who want to put in some training, and but they can't, because maybe they don't have the funding. Maybe they don't have enough officers in at a time. So I think information and learning on all sides is very good. So Dr. Taylor, what have you seen so far? I know we've had one meeting. Next meeting is next week, but have you seen anything so far, at least come out of their first meeting, that gives you a positive outlet to look forward to, keep moving?
Yes, I think that the first meeting was productive, and it was almost like we had to cut it short. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry that we didn't plan enough time for this. We were really in some really deep conversation and good conversation, talking about the different trainings and the different areas that we can, looking at. It was like education, but education of our providers, education of the community, and education of our agencies, right? Because everybody is coming at this at a different level. And we need to make sure people are on the same level so we know how to work together to best provide
Yes.
support, right? And that's
Yes.
one of the main themes that came out of it. It was like, when one of our chiefs were talking, and they were like, well, we do this training, and then one of the other chiefs was like, well, some of the other departments don't, and they're not there yet because they don't have the funding. Oh, well, they don't have the funding. And then, we're at the table in the district attorney's office. It brings up, well, we might be able to have grant programs for those offices so that
Yeah.
they get training. It's that, and bringing people to the table to talk about those pieces that might not have hit before. Even after our meeting, I had one of the local leaders of ASME reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're doing this domestic violence task force. Have you all thought about where workforce development fits in, because
Yes.
we have a lot of people, we have a lot of areas around the Southeast that we have job openings. We can train folks, and like, how are we linking workforce development with with our survivors,
Yes.
right? So that they can get out into the workforce and be trained and have a family sustaining wage and all of those pieces. But that came about because we had this task force. So
Yes, but that is absolutely amazing because there are a lot of individuals, not just women, but men also, because domestic violence affects us all, who struggle with getting out of the position that they're in and not going back because of finances. There are a lot of people who are in domestic violence relationships right now, and the only reason that they're there is because they cannot financially support themselves for whatever reason or however it happened. They are financially dependent upon the abuser. So to be able to recognize that there are men and women, in order to help save their lives, in order to help make things better for them, we do need to provide work. We need to provide training. We need to make education available so they can become stable and move on and forward in their lives. And to the average person, it may seem simple. You get up, you go to school, you get through elementary, through middle school, high school, you go to college and you get a degree and you get a job. Everybody's life is not like that. And that's not how it is in dealing with the world of domestic violence. And so those of us who can, we do need to step in and open the doors and create opportunities to work, to have education, and to think of those things and do those things that the victim or survivor can't do themselves. And I can tell you, it is very, very hard to focus, to get up, get dressed, and try to go on a job interview, trying to get a job. And at the same time, you're thinking, I got to stay alive. I got to be able to focus, to pull yourself together, sit in an interview. And I have done it. I've done it several times. So I had to put on my suit, go because I was looking for a job, because I was trying to help myself get to a better place. It's very difficult and it's very hard when you're doing it by yourself. So we have agencies who can step in and open those doors and help, and not make individuals feel bad because you need the help. I think that would be great. Is absolutely great. Jan, do you have a question or
Yeah,
comment?
I've got a comment. Domestic violence comes in so many different forms. You know, Sometimes it could be insulting. It does not necessarily has to be physical, but mental abuse as well is absolutely horrible. At least from a physical standpoint, those scars at times they get better. But when it's mental abuse, it's very difficult. So it's great that there's a task force such as this. But I do believe that education is the key. So, Dr. Taylor, for an agency such as yours, I think efficiency is so important when where male or female call when there's a domestic violence situation, that the proper people are in place to answer their questions. For example, as Minister Tier had mentioned, if you go to court, you want to get a divorce. That has nothing to do with child custody. So you have to deal with child custody, you have to deal with spousal support. These are all different because here in Canada, when you are in a domestic violence situation, you go to court to get a divorce. That judge don't want to hear anything about a spousal support or child support. That belongs to another claim altogether. So I think it's
Mhm.
really important. I don't want to use the word necessarily one stop shop, but it's really important when you have task force anywhere globally is to have different divisions and not where you call a number and it says, you know, press one for domestic abuse, press two for child custody. There really needs to be a very simplistic way that when someone called to one of these centers that are being abused, there's a person, a live person at the other end of the line instead of a machine, because it could mean saving a life between having a machine answering that phone call or a live person. And that is why it is so important that task force such as yours go to the government to get grants, get funding, so that you can have proper people in place to help people that are suffering in silence.
Yes. So thank you so much, Jancy, for sharing. Um, Dr. Terrell, I did want to mention that I myself, being a part of the task force in that first meeting, I did learn some information, that was helpful to me, because one of the biggest things on my heart and mind is that you don't want to wait until domestic violence is an issue and then you're trying to help someone just save their lives, and like you're in it and you're trying to get them out of a mess. I think a huge part of it is prevention. And in my mind, prevention has always been, let's talk to our children. Let's get our kids from elementary, middle school, and high school. And for forever, it has always just been very simple in my mind. Go to the school, schedule an assembly, and talk to these children all at different times. I've always thought it is absolutely perfect, or would be perfect, for the domestic abuse counselors to be able to go in and share information at an appropriate age level. I've always thought that it was a great idea for police to be able to go in and share, again, information on an age appropriate level. During this meeting, I learned it is not that simple. The police department can't just walk into the school and say, we need to speak to these children. We want to have a meeting. Counselors can't, outside counselors can't say this is an issue, that is affecting specifically our area or our community. We want to have an assembly to go in and present this information to them. The police department, domestic violence agencies, they have to get permission from school districts to go into the schools, and the school districts can say no. And I'm telling you, it blew my mind, because for forever I was like, what's the problem? Like, let's go talk. Like, we're not talking about anything demeaning. We're not talking about pushing kids one way or another, trying to harm them. We're talking about helping. Why is this not being done? But during that meeting, it was made very clear to me, there are a lot of chiefs, police captains, who want to go in and do some things that they can't do because they don't have permission. So even sitting in that room, just to see how the different agencies work together, and even the school district, how there is always someone who has to sign off and always someone who has to agree. And so you have a million pieces flying around that you have to try to bring together. It blows my mind, because at the end of the day, my thought is, and I said this in the meeting, how much is my life worth? Because when we get to funding and things like that, and we need grants, we need money, we need extra police officers, we need teaching, we need the training. How much is my life worth to make this happen? How much are our children's lives worth to have these assemblies, to bring this information to them, and to let them know this is what you can do to help yourself. This is an agency that can help you, or to give them some practical steps. If you are in the situation, this is what you can do. So I've learned valuable information myself, because I take Dr. Taylor, I'm just, look, A, B, C, D, go do it. It makes sense to me. But so I appreciate that. So I want to ask you, like, would that be, one of your objects of this task force, to open eyes? Because my eyes were open. Now, I didn't like what I saw, but I did have an answer.
No, and that's like part of it, right? Is understanding what are the hurdles that are in place,
Yeah.
and how then my goal really for the task force is to figure out, how do we break through those? How do we break through those barriers? How do we get around those hurdles? And when we think about education in the schools, each district is different, and we have 15 of them in Delaware County.
Yes.
And everyone has different rules and different regulations, different guidelines. And so it might be one of our goals as a group to come out with a standardized, like, okay, this is the education program that we think should be in place. And these are the number of assemblies we think should be on this topic. And maybe one's from the police department, or what they're doing a collective one together as the DAP and the local police department. And we're going into the school districts and doing something that's similar. I think it's not that the school districts aren't on board with it. It's just that they have a process, right? And sometimes they have that assembly calendar created a year or two ahead of time, right? And so we have to present them with what we want to do, and that is sustainable and that we can continue to do it. And I think that they would be on board. It's just we need to put that together. What does that
Yes.
education package look like? And then
Yes.
we need to present it to them.
I mean, I can clearly remember just from being a kid, elementary school, middle school. I remember the firemen coming in and teaching us stop, drop, and roll. If your clothes are on fire, I learned that from school, from firemen. You don't run because the air is going to increase the fire. Your clothes, no, you stop where you are, drop to the ground, roll. I remember that. I remember McGruff, the dog. I remember, don't go with strangers. Police officers came in and talked to us. I remember the uniforms. I remember how they took the time to talk to us, and it didn't take a long time. We had our assembly maybe 45 minutes, an hour, but it's lasting. I remember that information, even if my mom had said it, if anybody else said it, I remember that fireman standing in front of me in full uniform, all gear, saying stop, drop, and roll. Never forgot that. So how much more could it benefit us if we have someone coming in to explain to our children, if this is what you're seeing, this is how you can handle the information. That if there is something that is wrong, you can go to your teacher and talk, or you can go to the counselor, or just making it known to them that it's okay. Because if we don't talk to our children and let them know that particular behaviors are not normal, then they won't know. And they'll continue to stay in it and keep it. And they'll continue to suffer in silence by themselves. Because how many children in our households really think that and honestly believe what's happening to me, what's happening in here is happening in the other houses? And we don't know until somebody else comes and speaks to us and tells us. So I am a complete advocate for being able to go into our schools and talk to the kids and just let them know. And you don't have to beat them over the head, but present information to them again on their level in a way that they can understand. Because I'm telling you, I would be scared to death to talk to strangers because of what this officer said, and they cared. So you do have to have individuals who care about the children when they go in. You don't want to just scare kids or anything like that. But it's just so important. I believe it just really is important.
No, and I believe it's important as well. And I do think, and you brought this up during our first meeting, and I think everybody on the group was like, yes. And then they started talking about, well, we tried to do this one time, and it only worked in these three districts, and then it didn't work here. And so I do think that this is something that could be a clear goal of the task force. Okay, let's put together what is our education program and how do we see it fitting in an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, and then we can go and present it to the school district as a whole.
Yes.
I often have meetings with all of our superintendents, and to be able to present them with information, they are all they're all on board with trying to get our kids and our youth and our families the information that they need to live that happy and healthy life, right? And this is a part of that.
Awesome. Jan, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I wanted to speak about what you touched on it because there are 15 districts in the Delaware County. And my question to that was, are there programs to go into the schools in these 15 districts and speak to the middle school and high school students? Because we know that these students as well do suffer in silence, and there has to be mechanism in place where they feel comfortable. As Minister T was saying, they need to feel comfortable speaking to someone. So is this something that you're working on?
Yes, I think that what we were saying is that this is actually something that should be a goal of the task force. It's something that could come out. The task force is putting together that educational program for all of our districts to present to our districts and say, hey, will we be able to implement this next year in the school calendar? And and kind of do that piece. And I think that that is a clear goal that we should actually talk about with the task force. Like, okay,
Yes.
we know that this is a goal. We need to educate our youth and our families, and we can utilize the school districts to be able to do so, right, on a mass basis. And being able to put together that education program is something that I think everyone on the task force would be on board, and it's something that we need, and we've already identified as a gap. And
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's important, Minister Chia, because I mean, growing up in the islands, I've seen domestic violence where in this particular family, it seemed as though every single Saturday, um, the parents had it out and they would throw things at each other, break dishes, and just behave badly. And so there were about 7 children, and sometimes things are learned, behaviors are learned. And the
Mhm.
first son that experienced domestic violence more than any of the others, he himself, as he got older, did the same thing as the father. So some of these behaviors are definitely learned. So I think it's really important that a task force like yours get into the middle school and high school where you can really teach and empower young people.
But thank you so much. But I just want to welcome our listeners again, Dr. Taylor, before you comment on that. We want to welcome you again, Love Bay, to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern, with a replay on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern, and also on Thursdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. And before we go back to Dr. Taylor for a question or a comment, I want to share some more resources. We have the Ontario Native Women's Association. Their website is onwa.ca. Their number is 1-800-667-0816. Then we have Befrienders Volunteer Action to Prevent Suicide. To find a helpline by your country, you can visit their website, befrienders.org. And then we have the Canadian Women's Foundation. Their website is canadianwomen.org. Their number is 1-866-293-4483. So, Dr. Taylor, did you want to add or respond to what Jan was saying?
yes, I think just adding to what Jan was saying, thinking about something that you had said earlier, when we think about putting together this education program and how we want to present it to the school districts, and, how we want to make it, age appropriate for the different, the elementary schools, the middle schools, the high schools. And something you had said earlier was that, there are youth who are out there who are experiencing this in their home, right?
Mhm.
And they may think that no one else is, right? And
Yes.
it's the idea of talking about it and making them, more aware that this is who you can go to talk to. This is how
Yes.
you can report this, right? And the more information we have out there to to give our youth, right, the better they are for it. And the better they can handle the situation, the better they can get the help, the support, and the resources that they need and that their family needs.
Yes. We need to equip them. We
Hmm.
do. I mean, just as much as we need to help our adults and be there for our adults. Just imagine how we can be overwhelmed, but our children, I mean, it's just another magnitude, a whole nother level that they have to deal with. And we know that, our children sometimes can blame themselves for issues that are happening in a household. So we really, really have to make a way for them to open up, to understand what's happening around them, and to be able to get help and understand, you didn't cause this issue. You did not cause your father to treat your mother this way. You did not cause your mother to treat your father this way, or for your parents to maybe treat you in an abusive manner, if that be the case. I just really think opening the door to our children can save a lot of them from either becoming victims themselves, or can help them from becoming abusers themselves. Um, with that, Dr. Taylor, I would ask you, do you have a time frame in mind with the goals that are set forth for the task force? Is there a time frame that you want to see some things happening? And what is the measuring rod to determine what has been successful?
Yes, and so I think because this task force is really in its infancy, right? I think for us and for me, what I would like us to do as the task force is essentially map the system and see where we can make improvements,
Mhm.
create goals for our task force, and maybe we create short-term goals, right? By the end of the year, I would like us to have some clear goals by the end of the year that we can say this is what we plan to do, and maybe those are this is what we want to accomplish over this first year. These
Yes.
are what we want to accomplish by year three, right? Because it's there's going to be places where it might take us time to create those synergies, right? It might
Yes.
take us time to say, oh, we want every single of the 42 police departments in the county to be trained in
Yes.
right. And I can't remember what I think they said 16 out of the 42 were trained at this point,
Oh,
in
I think
terms
so.
of how to best handle a situation and how to right. And so that's a clear goal that we should have, right? And how what is a what's a realistic length for us to reach that goal, and how do we and we can easily measure it's a measurable goal to go forward with. But for me, I would like us to come up with a clear set of short term and medium to long term goals by the end of this calendar year, and then go from there. Because for us, we can actually set that timetable. Right? We are able to figure out where those areas are and where we can try to make improvements, how we could best try to make those improvements, and then
Mhm.
set the goals for ourselves. I am I'm a professor. I'm research based. I like data. I like information. I like to base our policy decisions on that, and I like to make goals that are measurable and attainable, right? And then think about how we get to those points. And I think we have a really good group together that we might be able to really look at the entire system
Yes.
in Delaware County.
Yes.
um, and try to figure out what are some ways we can better serve the people here.
Yes. So I have a question I want to ask you. I've actually been thinking about it for a couple of days. I know it's a big question, but I will generalize it. So not just specific to Delaware County, but just in general, how does the role, and I already know I have my answer, but how does the role of politics play into helping or denying the progress of dealing with domestic violence in counties and cities? Because, when it comes around election time, and I don't care which party you're on, Democrat, Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. When election time rolls around, we start hearing a lot of promises. Um, and I feel like there are some topics and issues that are used to get votes. So we will have individuals speaking about domestic violence, speaking about poverty, speaking about creating jobs, and then when you get through the election, everything falls apart. Those promises don't materialize. So how much, and again in general, does the role of politics play into actually delivering and getting help to individuals who need it?
Oh, I think politics plays a massive role in being able to get help, and being able to get support and resources, and being able to make the system more efficient. We do not play in this sandbox alone as a county government, right?
Yeah.
And we are also new to this county government, so we came in only 3 years ago and discovered all these silos, and we're like, what are we doing? And we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And it's like, oh, why don't we have a centralized food distribution process so that we can get people food?
Right.
Or why don't we have a health department, right? All these things are silos that were built over time because of politics, right? And we also have to depend on our state system for certain needs and certain resources, right? And so we have to work as a county government and think about our county, but we also have to think about how that interacts with the state government, right? And our federal
Yes.
government. And all of these pieces kind of trickle down to we're at the local level. We're not the most local, but we are the local level that provides the majority of our social services, right? Our human services, those that are out there to help individuals in our community, right? And so it is the end all be all. I think politics and trying to keep people accountable, right? And it can change overnight, right? So if we are essentially, if a completely different mindset or group come into office and we were here for a short amount of time, we could start a million things and have all these goals, and we could set goals at the end of the year, and that could change just like that, right?
Yes.
Because then someone else could come in and have a different vision and have a different thought process, and maybe they don't think that this is that important or that's that important or whatever the topic may be, and so it's always at the whim of where we're going, right? As a constituency.
Well, how can we, and Jan too, I'll go to you for a question or comment after this, but how can we hold our politicians and our organizations responsible? So I understand the pat answer, we speak when we go vote, whoever we want to vote into office. I understand that. But whomever is in office when they get to office, how can we then hold them accountable to meet the needs of social services, to meet the needs, just of basic humanity? Is there anything that we can do to really emphasize, we want our communities not to suffer under domestic violence. We don't want our children to suffer with child abuse, poverty, lack of education. We don't want our society to suffer. Now, what can we do to enforce that these things are going to be done, that some changes are going to happen?
I think the
Or
more
is there anything?
well, I mean, yes, of course there's voting, right? But there's also trying to be as much a part of the process as you can be, right? And being at the table. And we have tried to create an inclusive government and trying to bring people in as much as possible, right? Whether that's we have everybody on council has open office hours where people can come in, express their concerns whenever they want, and we can talk through it and we can work with somebody else and bring everybody into the fold. We have task force, but we also have our boards and commissions that oversee so many different areas of government. I think trying to hold us accountable by being a part of the process.
Yes.
um, being
Yes.
being here, you're at the table, right? And so for this task force, if I do not have us at the point where we have goals by the end of this year, I will say, please hold me accountable because that is my job. That's what I said I'm going to do, and that's what the purpose is, right? Because we can't. I don't like to sit and not get things done, right? I want to
Yes.
set goals so that we know what we're doing, and so everyone is on board with it and understands what our goals are, and then push towards meeting those goals, right? We can't do that when we're just like talking about these are all the issues and all the problems. We have to define that. We have to figure it out, and then we have to make actionable goals so that we can go towards fixing it. Right?
Yes.
Sometimes we get stuck in the problem and then we can't see the solution and really about trying to move it forward. And I think the more people can be involved in the process, the more they can help hold people accountable to that.
I think that is amazing. That answer is awesome. Be a part of the process. That is absolutely amazing. Look, the next office that you run for, just put me on your ticket or just put me in the office with you so I can help you get this up. I see you going places. I do. I really do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Jan, too, do you have a question or a comment?
I think it's what you're doing, Dr. Taylor, is so relevant. It is so important. I know here in Canada, one of the questions Minister Tier talked about is, you vote for politicians and, they get into power, you put them there. And then once they get into power, they're non-existent. I think the onus is on the people in their constituents to continuously go and speak to politicians. I know here in Canada, there are so many task force that is set up by the government. Also, if you're visually impaired, whatever your circumstances as a person, there are hotlines that is available, and these hotlines are available 24/7. So I know here for people in Canada, they can go on to canada.ca or ontario.ca, depending on where they live in whatever province, and find information there. But a lot of these hotlines are 24/7 where people can go and get access. And I know in certain countries it is not that way. So for me, for politicians and people in government that's listening, you know, once you are voted in power, especially when it comes to domestic violence, domestic abuse, for men and women alike, they need to stick to their promises. And if they do not, then we as a people should hold them accountable and remember that we are the ones that put them there. We give you that job. So don't be afraid to go and ask and comment. Send letters. Call their secretaries. That's
Mhm.
what we do here in Canada. Call their secretaries or get on radio like Love Bay Radio and say, look, this is what is happening. Let us reach out to that politician for you. Because if they make a promise to do something with respect to domestic violence or anything surrounding that, they need to uphold their end of the bargain. So, kudos to you, Dr. Taylor, and also to Minister Tia for writing that book, Suffering in Silence. I think one of the things you need to do with all these districts in Delaware County, you need to lobby to get this book in the library so that young people can be educated, because I know that a lot of, again, not just young women but young men as well, suffer in silence. So it's really
Mhm.
important to get literature out there so that they can read, at least put pamphlets, whatever it is,
Mhm.
so that young people would know that there is hope. I can reach out to somebody like Minister Tia. I can reach out to someone like Dr. Taylor. Just knowing that there's someone there makes a huge difference and can possibly save a life.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dan, too. Um, just again, just adding to what you said, I just believe that education for our children is just so important. Just letting them know and understand, and just opening a door for the information. I find it just um, I don't know if I want to use the word odd, but I mean, you can walk into a school and you can find information being presented to our children about sex education. There are some schools condoms are actually given out, and they're taught about birth control and and things like that. And I am for education of our children when it comes to health and when it comes to sex education. I think they need information. They need correct information in front of them. But if we're teaching our children about sexual health and we're not talking to our children about sexual assault, I just don't see you know, how that's going to fly, because we have children abusing each other. We have children being abused, being sexually assaulted, being physically hurt. So if you're passing out condoms in the school, someone also needs to be stating an information that you do not have to have sex if you don't want to. That no one can force you against your will. No one can hurt you mentally, emotionally, or physically. I just think that we need to cover all the ground, not pick and choose parts, because you pass out condoms, there are more questions that kids have, whether they voice them or not. There are questions that they have. And then when you have a situation of children trying to help children, answering questions and they don't know anyway, and they're trying to, no, we need our adults to come in and make sure that our kids are well rounded, and healthy in every way. Um, so we'll
Minister
just,
T, if I can
yes.
say, there's someone that wrote and they said that, I find that a person being abused or in need of help, knowing my past of not truly understanding abuse, and they said this is the perspective of a man. So it goes back again, Dr. Taylor, to education. Here's a man saying, you know what? He finds that people that are being abused are in need of help. And knowing
Mhm.
my past, whatever that is supposed to mean, knowing his past of not truly understanding it. So at times I feel that whether it's male or female, you're abusing your partner and you yourself do not see it as abuse.
Mhm.
So education is definitely, I think, the key to at least help solving domestic issues. I
Mhm.
should say domestic violence issues. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. And to both of your points in terms of education and Minister, to your point, the CDC talks about domestic violence as a public health problem.
Yes.
And so we should treat it as a public health problem and educate just as we would educate on any other public health issue, right? And make sure that our kids understand what is happening. The more I'm a big believer in, I used to, when I was on the Upper Darby School Board, it was about the more education, the more information we can, give our kids and the more tools they have in their toolbox, the more successful they're going to be in life, right? They just, the information, they can take that and use it how they will. But the key is to make sure they have that information.
Yes. I think that was a perfect answer. Making sure that they have the information. You can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, but the water is there. And we need to provide the water. Um, we are just under the hour, but Dr. Terrell, I have one more question that I wanted to ask you. Um, when we talk about funding, and I mean for any county, for any city or state, where do the funds actually come from to help with issues like domestic violence, sexual assault, children and youth services, paying our police officers overtime? Where do those funds come from? And why is it so hard to get funding for these areas?
Yes. So, I mean, funding in itself is one of the reasons why our government entities and the supports that we provide are so siloed, right? Because there's several different funding streams. So when you think about our police officers, for the most part, they're funded by the municipality or the local government that supports them, right? And so that goes on the township, the borough, and we have 49 of them in Delaware County, right? We have
Mhm.
49 municipalities. When it comes to human services, we get funding from the state, but we also get funding from the federal government. And sometimes those funding streams, we have housing funding that comes to help support people who are unhoused or need rapid rehousing. Some of it comes from the federal government, and we can use it for certain groups, certain pockets. Some of it comes from our state government. Some of it is a pass through from the federal government to the state government and then to our local government, right? So there's all these different streams of funding that come down, and some of them have more strings attached than others. Not strings, but regulations around it, or how we can use it
Mhm.
to support the community. And so that kind of makes sometimes for those siloed pockets of support or programs. Uh, there's been, in general, there's been a push, although not as much has been actually put into practice yet, for more more funding in terms of human services, especially when we look at mental health supports, right?
Mhm.
And over the years, in terms of human services and public health, we've seen, not recently, because we've been in a pandemic and people have started to see the errors of their ways, right? In terms of funding streams for those resources. But before that, we saw constant decline in those line items in the budgets, in the state budget, in the federal government, and we weren't supporting public health as much as we should have been over the
Mhm.
years. And that has an impact. And those types of impact, when you cut funding, look at our school districts. They're still recovering from when Governor Corbett cut funds back in 2008. They're still recovering from that cut in public funding for education. They haven't gotten back to where they were before yet. And so when people make cuts, it has a long-term trickle effect. And it takes us so long and so much more to get back to that baseline essentially before we
Right.
can move forward with new things, right?
Wow. Thank you so much. So we are at the hour. So Jan too, I would ask if you have a final question or comment for Dr. Taylor, and then Dr. Taylor, I would ask you to close us for the evening and leave us with whatever words you would like to have our listeners know around the globe. Jan?
I would like to say that we need to have a Dr. Taylor and her task force in every single country and province of this world. Because in any country you go to, no matter race, color, or creed, no matter the religion, there is domestic violence. And it's really important, Dr. Taylor, what you are doing. So thank you. On behalf of women and girls, yes, and just men, boys around the globe, thank you for what you're doing. May you continue to sow and succeed in those short-term goals that you're going to be setting, and long-term goals, I should say. My wish is for you to achieve every one of them successfully.
Thank you. Dr. Taylor?
Well, thank you both, and thank you for having me on the show today. This was such a great conversation, and I look forward to having more with you in the future.
Yes.
I think that we should go ahead and set a date for January to talk about the goals that are coming out of the task force
Yes.
and how we're going to accomplish those and what we decided on. This work is just it's a passion of mine, and the, the more we can serve people, the better people are, the better it is for our entire society, right? It's good, and it's when people are living happy, healthy lives, it's good for all of us, right? And so that's the goal, and really that's the goal of our government. It's what we're here to do, and it's how we're trying to serve the people. And if we could do it better, please let us know. And if you're listening and you want to get involved, please reach out. We would love to have you. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You will definitely be back in January. Thank you, Jan, too, for being with us. Dr. Taylor, I can't express my appreciation enough. And I can tell you before this evening, I never envisioned myself in politics, never. But I'm telling you, if you, as you move forward, I will roll with you. Love, babe.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. Lovely. If you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Love Bay family, please remember that we are rising out of the ashes together. Good evening. Thank you